fellow Narnians. This is Marty with part two of Christian Artist, the origins of the metal, and this is the more extreme metal part. So you had bands like Resurrection Band, you had Daniel Band, you had Jerusalem, you had all these Barren Crosses, you had Barren Cross, you had White Cross, you had all these people starting to move the envelope, and then towards the but then you had bands on the other side. There were Metallica and Slayer. You had these bands starting to really push the envelope in the secular music market. And so there was another band out there called Vengeance. They started out with their name Vengeance, and then they became Vengeance Rising. They took a little bit of the thrash, a little bit of the speed metal with the darker, heavier vocals, and then it became Vengeance. Now, this album eventually said Vengeance Rising underneath because there's another band called Vengeance that didn't want to use the name. So yeah, this is Vengeance from Roxx Records that was reissued, but it's very, very similar to the other one. So Vengeance, I felt like these guys really kicked it off, even though there were probably some other bands that were close to it. Bloodgood had a lot of speed metal in them in the beginnings that you're like, oh, they're going to go this direction, but they went more of the softer side of things for a little bit and then came back a little bit. But yeah, this is Vengeance. I felt like they were the guys that kind of started off the whole extreme metal that were in the Christian market. And then you had a band like Mortification, and these guys just sounded amazing. This was Mortification, Scrolls of the Megaloth. These guys from Australia. This is probably their more popular album. It came a little bit out, not much, about the same time probably. And Mortification, if you ever get this is more of the death metal feel, kind of. A lot of heaviness, thrash, the growling vocals. A very well produced album. It's probably one of the better Christian extreme metal albums out there. And I don't really know what the label out of these things is. They say death metal. You've got Djent, you've got, speed metal, you got thrash. To me, it all just kind of, I call it extreme metal because it all just kind of flows in and out to me, and some of it I can't really tell the difference much. I'm sure everybody else out there can tell the difference. Well, this is exactly this, and this is exactly that. It's like me with metal, I consider old school metal just as much metal as the new stuff, so I don't know. Then you have bands like Seventh Angel come out, which were really great bands. Seventh Angel and Detritus, I always felt like were very similar bands. And they all went did different things. Some of it started out as thrash, and then went to death metal, and then with the. And I think another band that kind of started all this out a little bit was Trouble. Trouble were on a secular label. They were their label tried to call it white metal. They did doom metal, which I feel like doom metal sometimes is part of the extreme metal part of it, even though it kind of sounds like the old Black Sabbath a little bit. But Trouble, they're mostly guys. A lot of the guys were Catholic, but they were using a lot of scripture references in their songs. So I thought Trouble had a lot of beginnings with this. And then there's bands that were like Living Sacrifice that were doing some really heavy stuff. But they're, and then after a while there's Horde. There was a ton of extreme metal bands in the underground out there. So if you look for them, they're there. There are a lot of these bands that came from churches and different areas that were doing this really heavy music and were influenced a lot from a lot of the Christian bands that were doing the harder rock. So, yeah, there's the extreme metal part of it for you. And I just encourage you to look up some of these bands because they're really good and they sound great. And even on the pre-metal side, the metal, and then the extreme metal. So take a look at some of this stuff because I don't see very many people going over this a lot on a lot of these channels. So look up Vengeance Rising, look up Living Sacrifice, look up Mortification, all these bands. Detritus, and a lot of these are reissued and available for you. online. So take a look at them, see if you like them, or listen to them in different formats, see if they're for you, if you're interested in that kind of music. So this is Marty